The book of First Peter isn't just an ancient letter, it's almost like a breath of clarity for anyone trying to understand why life sometimes feels so heavy. Peter writes to people who were hurt, mistreated, confused, people a lot like you. And in the very first lines, he reveals something no one wants to admit, but everyone needs to hear. Suffering is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a transformation that God Himself is guiding. When you understand that, everything changes. It changes because pain gains purpose. It changes because faith gains shape. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together today, not as someone reading a religious text, but as someone uncovering a map that's been hidden for centuries, pointing the way toward days of courage and clarity. Every chapter of this letter carries answers to questions you didn't even know how to ask. But before we dive into all of this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far this message is reaching and walk this journey with you. The first lesson we learn from the book of 1 Peter is that the believer's identity is not built on external circumstances, but on being chosen by God, just as Peter affirms at the beginning. To the elect exiles, First Epistle of Peter, chapter 1, verse 1. When this truth settles in the heart, a person begins to perceive that they don't fully belong to this world, and that changes the way they walk through life. It's like lifting an invisible weight off the shoulders. And from that moment on, a new inner freedom begins to grow. Soon after, Peter presents the living hope that sustains this identity, declaring that we were born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 1, verse 3. This hope is not mere positive thinking, but a certainty that pulses and pushes someone forward, even when everything around them looks cloudy. It is like seeing a light that never goes out, no matter how long the night may be. This hope becomes daily fuel, and when it is present, even suffering gains a new meaning. Speaking of suffering, another powerful lesson emerges when Peter states that the testing of your faith, more precious than gold, that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 1, verse 7. This image of fire refining gold helps explain why certain moments require so much from us. Faith, when tested, does not weaken, it matures. And although the process is uncomfortable, the result shines with far greater intensity. With this understanding, one begins to face challenges with deeper wisdom. Continuing on, Peter then leads us to the call to live a life of holiness, saying, "Be holy, for I am holy." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 1, verse 16. Holiness, in this context, is not a distant or unreachable concept, but a lifestyle built daily. It is formed through small, consistent choices, acting with more integrity, speaking with kindness, thinking before reacting. These details shape a character that aligns with God. And little by little, this transformation becomes visible. Another essential foundation appears when Peter states that all flesh is like grass, but the word of the Lord remains forever. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 1, verses 24 and 25. In a world where everything changes quickly, opinions, beliefs, values, this truth becomes a secure pillar. The word remains firm, stable, trustworthy. It sustains when nothing else feels solid. And when someone begins to rely on it, life gains direction. Peter presents this word as an eternal reference that never loses its relevance. While countless voices compete for attention and often bring confusion, the voice of God brings coherence and rest. Setting aside a few minutes each day to read and reflect on Scripture can bring clarity to situations that once felt impossible to handle. And it's not just about reading, it's about allowing this truth to enter, shape thoughts, and guide decisions. That's how each step becomes more intentional. When these truths, identity, hope, trials, holiness, and the Word come together, they form a structure that strengthens the believer from the inside out. Identity tells who the person is, hope reveals where they are going, and the Word shows how to walk that path. It's like assembling a puzzle in which every piece fits perfectly. And once everything aligns, the Christian life gains coherence. This coherence becomes a source of strength in difficult days. As these lessons become part of daily life, the believer begins to see the journey with greater depth. Trials stop being just obstacles and become opportunities for growth. Cloudy days find light. Uncertain steps find direction. It's a quiet but powerful maturing process that starts internally and eventually flows outward. And in a natural way, it prepares the heart for responsibilities that go beyond the individual. After all, Peter is only beginning his letter. And it's exactly at this point that the transition happens. Peter expands the perspective to something greater and collective, presenting the believer's role within a spiritual building that involves purpose, responsibility, and testimony. This next stage begins to take shape when he describes the call to live as living stones in the spiritual house that God is building. Living as part of something greater is one of the most striking images Peter uses when he describes believers as living stones being built into a spiritual house. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verse 5. This metaphor shows that no one stands alone. Each person carries an essential role in God's purpose. Just as a building depends on every piece to remain firm, the community of faith grows stronger when each one embraces their place. There is meaning even in the seemingly small details, and each detail contributes to the whole. Within this same revelation, Peter presents the role of a priesthood that proclaims the virtues of God to the world, stating that we were called out of darkness into His marvelous light. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verse 9. This calling is not limited to speeches or religious positions. It manifests daily through attitudes. It is the silent shine seen in how someone treats others, chooses integrity, or stands firm in what is right. Such a testimony reaches even those who are not actively seeking answers. And when it is seen, it rarely goes unnoticed. The expression of these virtues becomes even more powerful when behavior confirms the message. In many cases, an act of kindness builds more bridges than long explanations. Peter makes it clear that proclaiming is acting, living, reflecting. Each gesture carries the potential to awaken hope in someone nearby. When that happens, the ordinary day stops being ordinary, and it becomes a constant space of impact. Peter also addresses the posture toward human authorities, teaching, "Submit yourselves to every human institution for the Lord's sake." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verse 13. This attitude does not mean agreeing with everything, but acting with consciousness and integrity. Submission here doesn't arise from fear, but from spiritual maturity. It is the ability to respond with balance, where many respond with impulse. Such a posture is not a sign of weakness, but of discernment, and those who observe it notice the difference. When a believer acts this way, their testimony becomes evident. The world is quick to notice inconsistency, but it also deeply admires someone who walks with respect and firmness at the same time. A wise posture opens doors that aggression would close. It creates dialogue where walls once stood, and Peter shows that living this way produces an impact that goes far beyond words. After all, consistent character has a power of its own. The letter also highlights the importance of doing good even when the response received is unjust. Peter writes that if, when you do good and suffer for it, you endure, this is commendable before God. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verse 20. Doing good when everything is favorable is simple. Continuing to do good when there is opposition is what reveals true maturity. This behavior disarms expectations, and it shows that goodness does not depend on circumstances, but on conviction. To reinforce this principle, Peter points to Christ as the greatest example, stating that He suffered for you, leaving you an example. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verse 21. The unjust suffering Christ endured was not defeat, but an expression of purpose. He shows that enduring evil while doing good is walking in His steps. And this awareness profoundly transforms the way adversity is interpreted. Pain gains direction, and the heart finds strength not to give up. Peter also says that Christ did not retaliate when insulted. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verse 23. This reveals a completely different way of dealing with attacks and offenses. Instead of feeding cycles of hostility, he chose to break them. Such a choice does not lower anyone. In fact, it elevates. It is the wisdom that refuses to repay in the same measure. And because of that, it creates paths where only conflict existed before. The letter then begins to shift the focus toward relationships within the home and daily life, preparing the way for the next subject. Peter moves from the realm of public testimony into the realm of intimate relationships, showing that the gospel transforms not only outward behavior, but also the way we treat the people closest to us. And from this point forward, he begins to unfold deep lessons on respect, harmony, and maturity in the bonds that sustain life. Peter begins addressing family relationships by showing that faith is not limited to the temple, but reaches into the daily routine of the home. He instructs wives to walk with wisdom and respect, and husbands to live with understanding and honor, as written, "Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing them honor." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 7. This teaching reveals that genuine spirituality transforms the way people relate. Mutual respect, when practiced, creates a healthy environment, and that environment shapes the heart. This harmony does not appear automatically. It is the result of daily choices. Peter guides wives to influence more through conduct than through words, saying, "that they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 1. This shows how silent attitudes can create deep changes. Sometimes the conversation that fails through words succeeds through example. And when the example is consistent, it communicates more than repeated speeches ever could. The apostle also describes inner beauty as a value that never fades, stating, "the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 4. This kind of beauty is visible, even when no one comments on it. It appears in serenity, patience, and gentle treatment. In a world obsessed with appearance, Peter points to something that outlasts time. And those who cultivate it carry a quiet strength that transforms the atmosphere around them. When speaking to husbands, Peter instructs them to honor their wives so that even their prayers are not hindered. This connection between relationships and spiritual life shows that faith is not detached from behavior. Care, dialogue, and understanding become expressions of worship. When someone chooses to listen more, react less, and care better, they build bridges where there were once walls. And that type of change reflects true maturity. Peter then broadens the view and speaks about community relationships, saying, "Finally, all of you, be of one mind, sympathetic, loving as brothers." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 8. This reveals that unity begins with intention. Being compassionate does not mean agreeing on everything, but choosing to understand. Such a posture creates cooperation instead of conflict. And where there is cooperation, growth naturally follows. He also teaches to respond to evil with blessing, affirming, not returning evil for evil, but on the contrary, blessing. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 9. This instruction confronts the natural impulse to retaliate. A blessed response breaks destructive cycles and opens paths of peace. It is an attitude that surprises those who witness it. And often, that surprise opens doors for changes that aggressive words could never produce. Peter continues by emphasizing the importance of controlling the tongue, saying, "Let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 10. This shows that how we speak holds the power to build or tear down. Choosing wise words means investing in lasting relationships. A gentler tone diffuses tension, and well-chosen silence prevents unnecessary battles. He then teaches about defending the faith with gentleness, affirming, "Always be prepared to give an answer, yet do it with gentleness and respect." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 15. defending the faith is not about winning debates, but explaining hope with clarity and humility. Truth presented calmly carries more weight than aggressive arguments. It is like planting a seed that grows at the right time. And that seed finds room in the heart when it is placed without force. Peter closes this section by reminding believers that a clean conscience is a powerful shield against unjust accusations. He writes, "Having a good conscience, so that those who slander your good behavior may be put to shame." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 16. When behavior is consistent, even criticism loses strength. This posture reveals maturity, faith, and balance. And it prepares the way for a deeper understanding of the next theme, the value of suffering in the spiritual journey. Peter begins this chapter by reminding believers that suffering should not catch them by surprise. He writes, "Do not be surprised at the fiery trial that has come upon you." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 4, verse 12. This perspective completely changes how challenges are faced. Instead of seeing adversity as defeat, Peter presents it as a natural part of the journey. It is an invitation to look at pain with deeper maturity, and such maturity strengthens the heart. He adds that suffering for Christ is sharing in his sufferings, stating, "Rejoice insofar as you are sharing Christ's sufferings." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 4, verse 13. This does not mean seeking pain, but recognizing purpose within it. There are meanings understood only when faith is tested. If Christ walked through afflictions, his followers will also walk through difficult moments. But that path is never meaningless, and understanding this brings courage. Peter also reminds believers that God is glorified when his people endure trials faithfully. He says, "If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 4, verse 14. This reveals that suffering for Christ does not diminish a person, it honors them. While the world often equates pain with loss, Peter presents it as a mark of belonging. There is a deep joy hidden in this kind of endurance, and it is discovered only by those who remain steadfast. In facing difficult situations, Peter teaches that no one should suffer because of wrongdoing, saying, "Let none of you suffer as a murderer, thief, evildoer." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 4, verse 15. This highlights that meaningful suffering is the kind that comes from integrity, not error. Some pains are avoidable, others are refining, and knowing the difference is wisdom. When someone suffers for doing what is right, they find honor before God and clarity amid chaos. Another essential lesson appears when Peter speaks about serving one another with the gifts God has given. He writes, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 4, verse 10. Gifts are not decorations. They are instruments. They take on meaning when used to help others. Every ability, whether speaking, teaching, welcoming, organizing, counseling, or leading, becomes an expression of God's love. And when put into practice, it brings light to entire environments. Peter reinforces that these gifts must be used responsibly, as good stewards of divine grace, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 4, verse 10. This means no gift is given by accident. Everything God places in someone's hands has intention, timing, and direction. Grace appears in many forms, and each form exists to serve. So the believer not only receives, they distribute, and in distributing, they grow. He also declares that everything should be done with the purpose of glorifying God, so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 4, verse 11. The focus is not on ability, but on purpose, speaking, serving, teaching, helping all gain eternal value when they point beyond oneself. This awareness transforms simple actions into seeds that endure, and turns every gesture into an act of worship. The letter shows that living with this purpose reshapes how a person handles pressure and responsibility. God's glory becomes the compass that guides decisions. It brings balance when fear rises. It provides focus when the mind wanders, and it restores strength when the soul grows weary. Peter reveals that such a life grows deep roots, and deep roots stand firm in difficult days. As he closes this section, Peter begins turning the reader's attention to something essential: leadership, humility, and spiritual vigilance. He prepares the heart to understand that the Christian walk involves mutual care and collective responsibility. And he shows that, to move forward with strength, one must understand how to stand before the flock, before fellow believers, and before the spiritual enemy. Peter begins this chapter by speaking directly to leaders, showing that spiritual authority is not about position, but about the heart. He writes, "Shepherd the flock of God which is among you." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 2. This instruction reveals that to lead is to care, not to control. A true leader guides with patience, discernment, and example. And when this posture is embraced, the flock thrives. He also teaches that this care must be offered willingly, not under obligation, stating, "Not by compulsion, but willingly." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 2. This shows that motivation matters just as much as action. When service flows from a willing heart, it bears fruit. When it comes from pressure, it becomes heavy. Peter emphasizes that the right disposition creates a healthy environment around the leader, and that environment inspires others to serve with joy. Next, Peter warns about the danger of leading for personal gain, saying, "Not for dishonest gain, but eagerly." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 2. Here he exposes one of the most subtle temptations of leadership. Leading with hidden motives always causes damage, but leading with purity of heart builds credibility. This kind of leadership attracts trust, and trust is the soil where strong relationships grow. He continues by showing that leaders must not dominate, but serve, affirming, not as lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 3. Authoritarian leadership may produce temporary obedience, but it never produces transformation. Genuine example, however, moves hearts. Peter points to a model of leadership that is humble and encouraging. And such humility dismantles resistance in a quiet yet powerful way. After addressing leaders, Peter turns to the younger and to the rest, instructing, "All of you be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 5. Mutual submission creates an environment where no one feels superior. Humility does not weaken, it strengthens. It opens space for dialogue, growth, and healing. Where humility exists, unity flourishes. And where unity flourishes, God works freely. Peter reinforces this by reminding them that God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 5. Pride closes doors. Humility opens them. This applies to relationships, decisions, projects, and dreams. God's grace flows more abundantly where the heart bows willingly. And Peter invites believers to walk deliberately in this posture of dependence. He continues by teaching that all anxiety must be placed upon God, declaring, "Casting all your care upon Him, for He cares for you." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 7. This truth frees the heart from the weight of trying to control everything. Anxiety isn't defeated by hiding it, but by surrendering it. That surrender is not weakness, it is trust. And when believers cast their burdens upon God, they find real rest. Peter then instructs believers to stay spiritually vigilant, saying, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion." First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 8. This shows that the spiritual journey requires awareness. It is not about fear, but about discernment. Invisible battles attempt to shake faith, steal peace, and derail purpose. Sobriety keeps the heart alert, and vigilance keeps faith standing firm. Finally, Peter presents a powerful promise that supports the entire letter. The God of all grace will perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 10. This reveals that, in the end, it is God Himself who completes the work. Believers face trials, challenges, and responsibilities, but they never walk alone. The God of grace is shaping, securing, and maturing every step, and this certainty opens the door to the final stage of your journey. When gathering everything Peter taught, it becomes clear that his letter builds a profound vision of spiritual leadership. He reminds that leaders must care for the flock with genuine humility, following the model of Christ, who called his followers to serve one another. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, verse 11. This posture does not diminish, it elevates, and it inspires those who walk alongside. This humility becomes even more evident when Peter reinforces that a proud heart encounters divine resistance. He writes, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 5. Grace flows where there is surrender. Pride builds walls, humility builds bridges. And these bridges allow relationships to become places of healing and growth. In this way, the community is strengthened from the inside out. Peter also highlights the importance of mutual submission, creating an environment where no one considers themselves superior. This kind of coexistence produces balance and wisdom. Submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Epistle to the Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 21. When this posture is practiced, conflicts become smaller and agreements become more possible. And unity naturally flourishes. It becomes a silent testimony to those who observe from the outside. Another essential element in this synthesis is spiritual vigilance. Peter firmly warns, be sober, be vigilant. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 8. Life requires attention because there are influences that try to distract, weaken, or confuse. Vigilance does not mean living in fear, but living in awareness. Awareness protects the heart. And those who remain attentive keep their faith burning even in the darkest days. The sobriety Peter recommends is reflected in the way one thinks and acts. It prevents impulsive decisions, rushed words, and reckless steps. Sobriety creates space for discernment. And where discernment works, error loses strength. The prudent sees danger and hides himself. Book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 3. This ancient counsel connects perfectly with Peter's instruction, and it reveals how spiritual principles endure through generations. At the center of this synthesis is also the care of God. Peter states, casting all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 7. This phrase summarizes the heart of the Father. Nothing that worries you passes unnoticed. He watches, sustains, and guides. This trust transforms how pressure is handled, and it calms areas that once felt impossible to calm. The letter ends by offering a promise that anchors the soul. The God of all grace will perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. First Epistle of Peter, chapter 5, verse 10. This promise reveals that the spiritual process does not depend solely on human effort. God Himself perfects and strengthens. He uses trials, victories, and ordinary days to mature character. And He directs each step with perfect wisdom. Such certainty brings hope even when everything feels unstable. Knowing that God establishes and confirms allows the heart to remain firm. No matter what tries to shake the path, a greater rock is holding everything beneath. The Lord is my rock and my fortress. Second Book of Samuel, chapter 22, verse 2. This truth cuts through storms, and it restores stability to the spirit. With all these truths woven together, humble leadership, mutual submission, spiritual vigilance, and the promise of restoration, Peter closes his letter, offering believers a complete vision of the spiritual journey. A path shaped by responsibility, care, maturity, and faith. And this vision opens the way for something even greater, which you will unfold in the next stage of your script. After walking through all these lessons, it becomes impossible to look at life the same way again. Now, The only question that truly matters is this: what are you going to do with all of it? Because knowledge without practice becomes a burden, but knowledge applied becomes transformation. So take a deep breath, look at your own journey with honesty, and ask yourself, what is the first step I can take today to live these truths with more courage, more clarity, and more purpose? Change begins the moment the decision is made, and it often looks small at first, but it grows over time. So now, answer this to yourself. Do you really want to stay the same, or are you ready to live a stronger, deeper life that aligns with everything God has called you to be? If your answer is yes, then keep going with me. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and don't forget to watch the video that's appearing on your screen. It will expand everything you learned here today and help you take the next step the right way.